Welcome, everybody, to VFX and Chill. We are here live, and I'm very excited for today's show. How about you, Seth?
Good God, I'm excited. Yes, this is like such an exciting set of guests we have today.
We are here with John LePore and Doug Appleton, Johnny Motion and Dougosaurus. Go find them. They are from the amazing studio Perception. Perception has been working with Marvel since 2009. If you see cool moving graphics and things on screens, or if you've seen a Marvel Studios logo, these people have made the award-winning title sequences for them, for the HUDs and all the acronyms.
The VIDEOs.
But anyway, Perception is largely responsible for the look of many Marvel movies. They've worked recently on Black Widow, Black Panther, Ant-Man, Wasp. If you see something on a screen in a Marvel movie, responsible. And one of the cool things about Perception is that some of their movies into real usable tech in the automotive and probably other places that I don't know. But that's my sloppy introduction to two very talented Emmy-nominated people right here with us today. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hello. That was a lovely intro.
Absolutely, it was wonderful to have you all. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you, guys.
All right, we'll be right back.
So yeah, you can see above us some of the lovely work available.
Let me go back to it. Here we go.
Oh yeah, there we go. The expanded Marvel.
It just keeps expanding. You know, they weren't joking when they called it the expanding universe. It keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Now, WandaVision is an exciting, interesting like genre experiment that is on Disney Plus, and hopefully you all have seen it. I don't know what we may or may not spoil as we step through things, but right now what we're taking a look at are the amazing end credits, which I have to assume are inspired by basically being inside. It's like inside the Matrix, if the Matrix were the RGB cells of an old television.
Wait, aren't we all inside the Matrix technically? Like, isn't that?
But this is a Matrix inside of the Matrix.
Okay, so you guys have spent a considerable amount of time in the Matrix, inside the Matrix, in order to create this, I would assume.
Yes, the double Matrix.
Double Matrix all the way. These are my freaking favorite titles in the world. Sorry, I just want to put that on record. I've seen you guys present on these at I think at like a Maxon company meeting. You did a 3D motion show at one point too and talked about them, and even then I was just like, I want more of this. I want more of them talking about these titles because they're so good.
They are so good.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear.
I heard that I might have an echo on the show. Let me know if that has disappeared or if I'm still echoing. But I don't think we can hear it from our end, so just let us know.
I've just been repeating everything you've said.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, is that not what we're supposed to do?
No, it's good. Keep going. Seriously, you've earned the right. Go right ahead. So yeah.
Incredible. So
Hashi, go ahead, man. We're really good at this.
Yeah. So 2009 is what I know as your first interaction with Marvel as the studio experience or as Perception. How did that come about? I mean, I feel like if you're fishing for work, catching a Marvel whale is very exciting.
So no question, it was something that we were hunting for a long time. And it actually goes back before 2009, I guess maybe as early as 2007 or so. The two owners of Perception, Danny Gonzalez and Jeremy Lasky, have been like lifelong Marvel fans. And there was just around that point in time, there was just starting to be rumors that like they were going to make a movie about Iron Man, and they were also going to make a movie about Hulk at the same time. And the two owners were angling very hard to try and get in the mix with Marvel to make some title sequences or do anything else that we could do with them. We were a very small studio at the time. Mostly, like, our entire portfolio was just making television commercials and broadcast promos and very traditional motion graphics boutique kind of work, circa 2007 or so. We ended up getting our foot in the door with a small like subset of Marvel who were making direct to DVD animated films. And they were like, well, like, would you guys make us a title sequence for one of these things? And we were just like, yeah, absolutely, of course. And we went so overboard on these, straight to DVD animated features and made like the most like epic and super cinematic title sequences that we possibly could. And they loved it. They were super ecstatic about it. And so around the time that they were working on Iron Man 2, which was, the first Iron Man had come out, was an explosive success. And Marvel Studios as like a thing was still like, I don't know if anybody there was even thinking like, oh, this is going to change the rest of, cinema for the next decade or whatnot. I think they were just like, hey, why don't we see if we can make like one or two sequels for these things and keep this moving along. They were making Iron Man 2 and they needed some on-set graphics playback. There's a scene where Tony Stark is doing a presentation at the Stark Expo and he's giving like a keynote speech kind of thing. And I think they may have had some graphics already and they just weren't happy with them. And they were all like, crap, what are we going to do to, find something else? How can we get some stuff together like really quickly that we can slam in there? And one of the producers at that point, who had used to work on these smaller straight to DVD animated films as Marvel Studios was maturing rapidly, he had been promoted up into a point where he was working on Iron Man 2, and he said, oh, I know these guys in New York, they'll be able to whip up something like really quick. So we got, a random call out of the blue, and it kind of blew our minds. We were all freaking out, jumping up and down in the studio, running around in circles, and did whatever we could just to put some really rad stuff together to hopefully get them all really excited.
Oh my gosh, that's so tremendous.
And that scene you're talking about,
can't imagine.
The scene you're talking about is from Iron Man 2, and it was where he's got the glass phone. Is that the one? And he's like,
So it started even smaller than that. It just started as like, there's like a presentation that he's giving and there's a big projection screen behind him that he's standing in front of that just needs to have branding stuff on it. Really easy stuff to do. We went into like overdrive on it. And while we were on a call with them and like pitching concepts to them, we heard somebody in like the back of the room be like, oh, that one with the like glass material, that kind of looks like his glass phone. And we're all like, what? Did you say glass phone? What was, what's that all about? Tell us more about that. And so as we finished this thing that was just supposed to be like a relatively boring, like PowerPoint presentation for Tony Stark, we made over a weekend just a really quick mock-up of like, what would Tony Stark's glass phone look like? What would be a sort of like, how could we mock up an interface for this thing that could be really cool and really exciting looking? And we pitched it to them completely unprompted, and they were actually really stoked about it. They were really excited, and they said, all right, well, why don't you guys make his phone? And then also he's got like a glass coffee table. He's got a bunch of glass windows in his apartment, and like this tiny little like PowerPoint presentation thing that we were making quickly turned into, I think it was like 125 shots on the film we were asked to work on.
To clarify, you guys had not been asked to spend the weekend prototyping the phone, had you? Was that just on you guys, or had somebody actually asked you to do that at that point?
No. Oh, no. This was like, no one even gave us a brief on this phone. We just heard that. We literally overheard in the background of a call someone say Tony Stark's glass phone. And we were just like, well, that sounds cool. I actually have.
I was gonna say, do you have that video?
Yeah, I was sorry if it looks like my eyes are darting around. I was just pulling it up, and I finally found this ancient file.
See if I can pull up.
So we we went to Home Depot, had them cut a piece of rectangular glass that was at the approximate sort of like aspect ratio size of a iPhone, which at that point in time was still like a very new sort of thing just to exist. So here, let me play this. And so there's my floated hands.
How did you present this? Like, were you like, oh, hey, we happen to make this? Like, how did you bring it into conversation?
It wasn't easy, and we were such new at this sort of stuff, and so foreign to working with the team at Marvel that I think probably was just kind of sent to them and just like, hey, please, if you can get Mr. Favreau to look at this for 20 seconds, we would be ever so grateful. And so the part that I didn't bring up is that we sent this. It went to them. We didn't hear anything. And that was because they were just making their movie. They were still putting this movie together, and whatnot. We thought like, oh boy, did we really upset them by sending this over there their way? And a few months later, because they reached out to us because they were heading into the post-production process. Okay, guys, we're ready to have you start like making the phone. And we're like, what? Really? We're gonna do that? And we just dove right in, and it was from there. It was full on like baptism by fire, for our first feature film project.
That's unreal. That's ridiculous.
Seth, I believe John's audio is doubled from his screen share, so if you would kill one of those audio sources, that would be excellent. Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Love it. So you started the VFX journey at a Home Depot, which
as we all do.
Yeah, based on an overheard comment presented to someone who didn't expect work from you. So it was like the longest, like no reply to chat. 3 dots appear, they disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of like the equivalent of like, you see like a director sitting in a restaurant and just like, hey, can I audition for this thing right now? And like hoping that it works out. And fortunately it did. And this was, I think, a few months before I started working at Perception. So I went in for my interview, and then Danny and Jeremy were just like, oh, hey, want to see something that we just like finished working on? I was like, sure, why not? And I was like, oh, it's just Iron Man 2.
That's amazing. So Doug, when did you join up with these guys?
About 11 years ago at this point.
11 years ago.
Yeah. Man. So 11 years, and then Johnny, you're like 15 years or 16 years or something?
15 years, I think this month, something like that.
It's a lot of years.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's been a little bit.
Yeah, it's that's like an eternity in motion graphics time. That's a lot of frames.
So right? I'm curious, after Iron Man 2, what happens next? Do you have to keep campaigning, or does Marvel just like, all right, you're in from now on forever till the end of time?
No, I mean, Marvel works with an enormous number of the biggest visual effects vendors that have ever existed in the course of our industry. And so that wasn't us just like, oh, okay, cool. We're in now. And even today, I wouldn't say that we're like something like 25 movies deep or something. And I don't think there's any sense that we're like, oh, we're in, we'll just, we're expecting a call any minute now for the next one or anything like that. Like it's, but we're very happy to have a great relationship with them. They are amazing collaborators. And like over the next few films that we worked with them on, like we could feel the sense of like trust increasing dramatically. And, getting to that point, you would think because they're operating at such a high level and they're such a sort of like intimidating client to have, that they would be very difficult to work with or work for. But they're blessed in that they're so successful that everybody has a certain level of like comfort and confidence in the work that they're doing, and the relationships that they have that work well, they are very trusting in them. And there isn't, with other clients, whether it's other film studios or just any other client in any medium, Any client that has that sense of like panic or concern, or they are worried if the project's going to come together, well or smoothly, those processes can always be miserable and very uncomfortable, and like they end up hurting the creative process so much because everybody's just so anxious about everything. And they're a great group that approach this stuff, with a great level of like confidence, and they're tons of fun to collaborate with. So we're honored that we have this opportunity. I mean, a lot of our success is absolutely us kind of like, just flying in their jet stream. They have the positive attention that we receive for our work is, to me, it's like 30% because of our work and 70% because it's attached to these beloved characters that people are so invested in and whatnot. So we couldn't be more thankful to have this ongoing relationship with the team at Marvel Studios.
That is so cool. And also, I happen to know this because I talked to you before on another show, a produced show here called Cheap Tricks, where that trust that you had with Marvel got extended to your work on Black Panther. And what I loved about that challenge was that at that point, there, however many Marvel movies in they were, and I feel like the Tony Stark tech blue hologram thing was a decade old maybe at that point. And so, but they trusted you to figure out, how do we visualize something that is not the same as we've ever done before?
Yeah, that was a really cool challenge because that was like a new space for us at the time, right? Coming in before they shot anything, right? They didn't shoot a single frame of the movie before. We came in to help them visualize that stuff, and like that was a huge challenge. Is we know Tony Stark. We can kind of assume everyone in the world has known Tony Stark, and that all technology is kind of derived from like his look, right? If you look at what Tony Stark has, what Shield has, and it goes to Wakanda, who's isolated themselves from everything. Like, what would their technology look like? And that was a really cool, unique challenge to try and figure that out. Work with the directors, work with the producers to kind of put all that stuff together.
And like for us, like we love this idea of conceptualizing and designing the future of tech. And there's been experiences that we've had in the past with other studios where they're just like, all right, so we need you guys to come in and just make like a whole bunch of like glowing blue shit that's just going to float in the background and remind people that the story takes place in the future. And that's like all it needs to do. And we'll be talking to them and like, so, what we're thinking that maybe the information could be projected by this new technology paradigm that uses the ambient humidity in the air to translate that into a refractive. And they're just like, no. Glowing
really?
Blue shit. Just give us a bunch of glowing blue hexagons so that people know it takes place in the future.
Well, hexagons are the shape of the future.
And
I think that's.
And so, like when we're with Marvel, I mean, it's awesome because they are much more willing to take like a deeper dive into this stuff and really try and have it be as thought out and have it be as unique and original. And I think that's reflected even in the so many of the characters in the stories are scientists and inventors and whatnot. And that they're interested in bringing that depth of thought into it, which I think is, as Doug was describing, it gives us a really good like opportunity to push the limits of what we expect from these kinds of materials.
Yeah, what I really like about it too is like the history or like sort of the thought process of how the things work might not ever be discussed in the film, right? It might not. There's never a scene where someone's like, "Ooh, what we're gonna do is start using acoustic levitation." Like none of that comes through in the movie, but you can feel it kind of in the end product, and I think that's a big part of it too. Is that we have these kind of crazy, wacky ideas, and we can point to a little nugget of truth somewhere of a technology that maybe in 20, 30 years, you could see this doing a thing, that really helps sell the idea too. You're like, okay, we can see how this isn't magic. This is sort of based in some little kernel of science somewhere.
I always bring up one of my favorite movie interfaces or technology paradigms is in the Mission Impossible 4, I think it is, where they're in Russia and Tom Cruise and Simon Pegg are trying to sneak down this hallway.
It's so good.
They whip out this projection screen, and there's cameras that are tracking them, but are also tracking the gaze and basically the point of view that the guard is watching it through. And I'm sitting there watching that in the theater, and my wife's sitting next to me, and I turn to her and I'm like, Gloria, you got to understand, this is so cool. They're using the camera to track the gaze. And I'm saying this to her, and she like turns to me and she's just like, yeah, John, like everybody knows that's what it's doing. Shut up. And I was just like, oh, that's great. Like that's the perfect job of that. Like when you can have this really complex technology that still is able to, convey immediately to an audience. To me, that's the holy grail.
It is. You're doing what's known as VFX explaining.
Yes.
100%. Oh my God, we're all guilty of it.
Yes, I try to not do that as much, but we all do that.
Well, I'll pause the show and be like, all right, kids, Dad's going to show you how they did this. And they're always like, we're going to show Dad we don't care. Like,
Dad, there's 5 minutes left. Can we
Get me a C-stand. Get me a C-stand.
No, hold on.
What do you guys have a favorite? Like, I don't want to say like movie, but in general, but like either title sequence or shot that you guys have done or effect you guys have done up to this point on anything?
I think you'll probably get a different answer from both of us. I think favorite effect that we've done, we did Zola in Captain America Winter Soldier. We did the sort of the Zola face in the computer screen.
Oh yeah.
That's a particular favorite of mine.
How'd you do that one?
So that one, it started out being this really long, convoluted process that by the end of it, you're like, oh, we could have done this much simpler than it had to be. But we actually had Toby Jones of like him acting with like tracking markers all over his face and all this stuff. And we ended up using like none of that. So like, no, make it simpler. But that's all done in After Effects. Lots of fancy layers. I mean, that was how many years ago was that now? I can't remember like specifics.
Don't tell me how many years ago. I'm going to get depressed because in my mind it was like last week or 2 years ago.
But it was just really cool because again, going into what is the technology of this, you look at the scene and it's just this football field sized room of just like reel to reel computers and like, oh, all of his data lives on those reels. So what does that make him look like?
So you can pull up my screen.
Oh, I'm about to pull it up right here.
And then pull up your screen.
You got a video or an image?
A video.
Oh, you got a video? Yours is better. Here we go. Going to Hashi's.
One of the things that was really fun about this was this started with a conversation with the Russo brothers who were directing Winter Soldier. And the first thing that they basically came to us saying was like, we're really worried that this whole thing could suck really bad. Like this could...
When you think about it, it's like, oh, we have a Nazi on a computer screen who's going to talk for 5 minutes.
Nazi trapped inside a computer.
Right.
Like, it's not even just like it's a feed of him. It's like, no, he is a computer, and we're going to see him. And they were like, you read this in the script, and you could imagine this looking like Max Headroom and being just awful. And, they sounded very concerned about it. And I was really proud that I think even in our first, like, design exploration, they were kind of mellowed out, or they were comforted by like, oh, okay, this could actually be this thing that is like ominous and weird. But for us, more than anything, it was all driven by like taking what's happening in the scene. They're surrounded by all this antiquated equipment, and we had to find a way of presenting something that felt as lo-fi as possible.
That is so cool.
Yeah, because kind of
what's the reference?
The Vectrex?
The
Tektronix, is that what it is?
4080.
Yeah.
I got it somewhere.
But yeah, so this thing, and when Johnny says our early exploration, this is not indicative of what we usually do. We did this to ourselves. Our first exploration was, I think we had a little bit of downtime. And so we kind of said everyone in the studio, like, hey, everyone throw your hat in the ring. Let's do some explorations. And we ended up with, like, I don't know, 20 different images or something like that. And we're like, you know what? We should just do a few more. And we could do directions A to Z for Arnim Zola. And that would be fun. Mm-hmm. And so our first drop to them was 26 different Zola images that I think we have all up on our site. And we don't normally do that, right? It's usually like, oh, here's like 5 directions or 3 direct, whatever it is. But this was just to let you know, like, how much fun we had. Like, we got to make this really cool. It's futuristic for the technology that it is, but it's still antiquated technology. But it was a ton of fun. And some stuff was like this. Some stuff was more like, more Max Headroom stuff. Some of it was like very clearly a picture of Toby Jones.
But the final image,
so
the final image is made up of what are the elements going into the final image again?
So the final image, we started with a base of the actor Toby Jones. We ended up not using really any of his performance. We just used I think we used one of his performances of him just like talking lines, and he filled it on blue screen with tracking markers on his face and just kind of talking directly at the screen. And then we ended up going through this process of painting highlights on his face, right? Because we wanted to get this kind of really moody look to it, tracking those highlights to his face, and then using that to drive, I think some of it is trap code form. There's probably, what was the other plugin? I think it was Omino. Do you remember that thing, Johnny? The Omino squares?
It was one of the Omino things that was making all the stripes.
Wow.
Yeah, and then combined with a few other things, but all these things kind of stacked together, all these different layers thrown in, and all glowy and all this stuff. But it's really like, yeah.
All this speak of antiquated stuff. Just before the show, we were talking about our mutual love of being able to crack open After Effects and create something using all native filters and plugins, just to try to really like go as stripped down as you can, try to approximate things. And I feel very inspired to try doing a version of Zola in After Effects and try. This would be very doable.
Yeah,
trap code form.
Sure. I think so. And I think if we did it now, we'd probably do it a lot quicker than we did, whatever it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, and I've said before on the show, like half of it is that journey of exploration to the cheat code of knowing what it looks like now means that I get to bypass all of the toil that goes into. I mean, you said you presented 20 plus versions of this to get to this point, and then that's something that I think is really wonderful to respect, especially when there are VFX tutorials on any of your things floating around. It's because that labor went into the original look, which is crazy.
The original look is actually one of the funny things is I think this look is pretty close to one of our original directions that got picked and then changed drastically, then cut out of the movie entirely. And then like 3 months later, be like, we're going to bring it back. And we actually want to go back to that first look that you guys did. And so it was a real roller coaster to get there. But part of the exploration too was going into things like his eyes are just black, right? And it's just a whole exploration of how much of his eye do we want to see? Do we want to see the eyes, make him feel more human? Do we want to just do pinpoints in the eyes? Do we want to just remove the eyes?
It's funny how much of it works.
Like,
it's funny how much it works because he has no eyes. Like, the lack of eyes makes it genuinely ominous and almost like it almost like gets you a huge way in that quest for not being stupid, for not being dumb, and actually being like working. Because from like a story standpoint and a tonal standpoint, it's like it feels really freaking ominous, like just from the void of eyes alone.
Yeah, that's so we had a version that had two little pinpoints for eyes, which I really liked, but something about that felt, I don't know, too like it was like he was just a skull with these little pinpoint eyes. And but then we also tried things where if you look at his mouth is a little wider than the actor's real mouth, because if you look at the comics, Zola's got this big wide mouth, and we're like, oh, let's hint at that a little bit and just stretch out the mouth. And
Oh, what a cool idea.
you know, trying to just little subtle nods to the comics. There was a pass at this where his mouth was moving, and then we decided to like, let's tone that down and just do like a waveform for his mouth. So all of these little things are what add to, you know, the process taking so long to make one of these. And now we see what the final looks like. We cut out all of that kind of exploration. You're like, oh, I could probably make that really quickly right now.
That is so wonderful.
For us, one of the things that I think always helps us is trying to find some sort of, you know, logic or rails or some reference that ties some of this stuff back to reality. Like, we never want this tech to just feel like magic, to feel like it's just totally make believe. We want to try and bring some authenticity to it. If you don't mind pulling up my screen, I've got like one of our original hero references for this, which was this is the Tektronix 4006. Tektronix make like oscilloscopes and some of the very earliest like graphics plotting.
Oh my gosh, I love this
computers.
stuff.
And like, just like for us, it was just like, yeah, when you see it like this, and when you see how like it looks like every image or every line or every element feels like it's being like burnt in to the screen. Like, it doesn't feel like it's pixels turning on or off. It feels like this is like a glass ball of radioactivity that has these things just like burning into it and leaving this persistence of image behind. And so that was one of the key things that I think motivated the direction that, you know, we were just looking at, as well as several others. We have so many. If you go digging on our site, I think we've got somewhere like a montage of like 100 faces of Zola or something like that, that we had.
I would like a coffee table book, but please. I would like all of these to be arranged into a coffee table book called The 100 Faces of Zola.
That's what that book is actually called, The 100 Faces of Zola. It comes out this fall.
Oh, Hashi's done. He left. He's I actually have a feeling he's going to shoot a plate, to be honest. He's probably going to go film himself now. Or what's he doing? You putting your Zola mask on? Hash? I can't hear you, Hash. You're either muted or I'm not sure what's going on.
So, closest thing that I have to a Zola mask is this pod racing helmet.
Nice.
Anakin's awesome. Pod racing helmet, but it does have some nice rims.
Yep.
Just like them.
Hey, where'd you guys get this footage of the Tektronix thing?
We were hunting YouTube. And hunting for we were just hunting for all sorts of stuff of like vintage graphics.
Oh, I didn't know if you found one or something, or like visited some tech museum of some kind or something like that.
I would love to have one of these, and we've got a pretty long laundry list of, you know, antiquated bits of display tech that we always find ourselves referring back to over and over again. Whether it's stuff like that. My number one favorite reference of all time here. I'm just going to pull up one more thing. This is something we always
do on the.
Yeah, it's Quake. Come on, Doug. Quake. Quake being played on an oscilloscope. Somebody found this technique for taking the graphics and turning it, I guess, translating the graphics into like sound frequencies that the oscilloscope would pick up and re-render as graphics. I love this so much. It is so incredible. And like the fact that like when it's static or it's still like
motion,
it looks like garbage, you know, but when it's moving around, you immediately see all the depth and all the space that's in there.
I hope that if Stu Mashowitz was watching, that he was sitting in a seated position
before he sees this, because this is unreal. Oh my gosh! Then the way that I love. Have you guys?
It's not Unreal, Seth. They didn't have Unreal Engine back then.
Michael, do we have to go on a permission only system here for you to speak? No, I want to. Did you directly? Okay. I have 80 million questions about this thing. Well, first off, is there anything that we've seen in a movie that you did that this directly influenced?
Yeah, this tied in a little bit to some work that we did on, and for us, I think this reference came up. Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but while we were working on Thor Ragnarok, and we were trying to come up with some ways of making holograms for that film that had a different feeling, and that feeling
we feel like Tony Stark.
Yeah, we didn't want it to feel like Tony Stark, and we wanted it to feel like pure, chaotic Taika Waititi.
These are like the big building like the ones with Goldblum coming up over like the city and talking and such.
So we didn't technically do those, but we did several others, and I think there was like some cross pollination with some of the concepts and ideas. Let me see.
I think we did early look dev on that Jeff Goldblum stuff, and then that got sent off to I forget who. I don't know. Got sent off to someone else who did it.
What does that feel like, by the way? Because I know that these Marvel movies are such a huge collaboration between people trying to share assets, mimic other people's work, people who worked out concepts and another studio is producing. How often are you pleased, surprised, upset at a version of something that you prototyped when you see it at the final?
Yeah, sometimes it's great, and sometimes like I wouldn't have done that, or like they didn't use that, like what we felt was the core idea that didn't make it in. But then it goes through so many people. But there are times where we'll come up and pitch some stuff, and then it goes to someone else. We're like, "Whoa, thank God!" Because I didn't know how we were going to make that in the movie. So. And someone else had to worry about
something amazing in this video you're playing right here. I had never realized that you pulled the shapes and patterns from Kirby straight up into the UI, like the way it showed it at the beginning of that video.
Yeah, that was really important to us on this, and not just us. I mean, that was important to Marvel and to Taika Waititi, that it was really a love letter to Kirby that we haven't quite seen before. I think
so good.
People impersonate Kirby and then you get the vibe of it, but it was really important that they grabbed like the actual shapes and design language that he used. So we tried to do that as much as we could in this, and hopefully that comes through in the work, that they're like, oh yeah, that is Kirby would do something like that.
Funny anecdote. Just funny thing about that, while we were working on this.
Oh, is this the tweet that gave me a heart attack?
Yeah, designed. So they had designed this logo for marketing, but we added in all the Kirby detailing and kind of greebling that happens. And we did a CineSync session with the filmmakers.
And that CineSync, for those who don't know, because I feel like Johnny, most people probably don't know what CineSync is just like a Zoom or Skype or something that we can use where we can all have the same file and play that back in real time, so there's no lag, and it's just a way to sort of collaboratively work with the studio because we're not in the same room, so we can both look at the same thing and with minimal lag like we would have here, Zoom or something.
And so we presented this via a CineSync session to the director, Taika Waititi, and several others who just happened to be in the room. One of which was Kevin Feige, who is the president of Marvel Studios and the guy who's like single-handedly responsible for their amazing success. About 10 minutes after that meeting, we looked.
I was walking back to my desk.
Yeah, like we were scrolling through Twitter and literally came across this. And Kevin Feige, during the CineSync session, took a picture of this and tweeted it out because it was also Jack Kirby's 100th. It was like
his 100th birthday, right?
100th birthday, and he put this out there as a tribute to him. I had a really easy time finding this tweet because like Kevin Feige's
I think he has 2 tweets.
Yeah, he's tweeted like 50 times ever, and this was one of them. And we were just scrolling through and we were like, wait a second, the thing we just did like leaked onto Twitter. Feige's gonna kill us. And then we were like, wait a second, Feige.
It was Feige.
Feige leaked it.
Feige leaked it. Oh my.
That was a fun like 2-minute heart attack because that's kind of the biggest fears that the stuff that we're working on like leaks out into the world, and it's like, oh god.
When that Spider-Man trailer leaked a while back, and I didn't see the leak, but I obviously saw a trailer of it, but I just saw a caption or something that said, described it as being watermarked with someone's name, and I like had a heart attack for that person the second I read that.
Yep. Oh yeah. But then you think like, did that guy like I know nothing about this, but I assume it was probably like someone, because it looked like a cell phone video of a screen of an unfinished trailer. So my mind is just like, oh, is that like that guy's roommate did that or something? Like, I don't know. I felt bad for that person because it all stems back to what it was. Wolverine. What was the movie that like the whole movie leaked with unfinished?
That was Wolverine.
That was
Wolverine.
But then they released it with unfinished visual effects. So
Yeah, I was gonna say. And like the person who leaked it ended up getting arrested. Like, oh, it ruined our box office. It's like,
no, it wasn't even the person that leaked it got arrested. It was like a guy who was selling it off of a blanket, out in front of Penn Station or whatnot. Yeah. Like they were like, "This is it. We found the kingpin, the whole operation," and they just like destroyed some guy's life while whoever it was that worked in the finishing house or whatever that leaked it out got away scot-free.
So piracy isn't a victimless crime. It's the thesis of our show.
Exactly.
We've got some questions coming in from the chat throughout this episode. I want to make sure we do address them at some point. Specifically, just kind of more general overall questions, really, before we start diving into more specifics on maybe WandaVision or some of the other things. Just what kind of software in general do you guys use in your pipeline?
We are primarily Cinema and After Effects. Those are our 2 go-to workhorses, everyday stuff. We'll also use Houdini and Nuke for if we need those things. But Cinema, 4D, After Effects are kind of the 2 everyday. Every person in the office is using those.
Cool, me too. Another question is what's your creative process to be really efficient? Because you're having to do all these turnarounds. How do you keep efficient as you work through this?
I see Johnny laughing over there.
Yeah, I would say efficiency and just generally like speed is a staple of our workflow at Perception. Even though we've had a lot of growth in the last few years, I would say we're still a considerably small team when you look at the scope or scale of some of the projects that we're working on. And we put a really big emphasis on efficiency and speed just because it'll, more than anything, we want to make sure that we're moving with momentum, we're keeping a pace, but that we also have a certain level of like confidence in our ideas that we're putting out there so that we can commit to them. We can start moving them into, further into the production process and commit more to whatever ideas and concepts we're exploring. We talk a lot about obsessing over the ideal level of fidelity at which you work, right? Like, many of us have a impulse to show how high of a fidelity we can reach as just something that is like, that is my metric for success, is can I make the most realistic or the most detailed looking thing ever? But we spend a lot of time encouraging team members to work rough and fast, to work lo-fi and sloppy. And that way, just to keep an emphasis on like the ideas or the concepts that are driving what we're putting together. And as long as we can like flesh that out the most and do it really rapidly, and also do it in a way where we're not getting like too attached to or too in love with our ideas, or just being like, well, I can't throw that away. It took me 2 days to make that thing. Whereas if it's like, oh, that was a test that took me 90 minutes. If we have to kill it for the sake of the greater good, like that's no big deal. And like that to us, I think just keeps the focus on the right things, on the ideas, on the concepts. And then when that stuff is getting fleshed out, then we can push that fidelity that much further and dial it in. Because I think at the end of the day, you can go really deep down the wrong tunnel or down the wrong pathway on a project before you realize that the core concept or the core idea maybe isn't working, and that's when things get really turned inside out.
Never experienced that ever.
Yeah, I think because what it is, what we've realized with this stuff, and it goes to when we're talking about like the Black Panther stuff too, is like 9 times out of 10, the idea is the thing that they're buying off on, not the visual fidelity of the thing that we've produced. So, really figuring out that fidelity, what is the least amount of work you can put into something to tell the idea the most efficient way. And that's kind of that sweet spot that we like to work at. Cause like Johnny's saying, you work 2 days on the most beautiful image. And then the client looks at it for, 5 minutes and goes, I don't like that one. Let's look at another thing. You're like, oh no. Oh, I spent so much time on that. So we've gone into pitches with like napkin sketches and being like, see this stick figure, we're thinking it does this thing. And it's like, that's a cool idea. Let's see what that looks like. And then, you can move on. But it's, finding the fidelity to work at.
John, you've got something on your screen. Did you have something on your screen you wanted to show, John? Or was that just something that was already?
Oh no, I'm just doing my online banking right now. Please don't share my screen.
Michael, hit us with some more.
I was just gonna say, that the concept of getting a good idea and a reason for something happening down first that makes sense before you start working on making the look perfectly finessed is an amazing tip for people who are just starting out and doing FUI stuff or even visual effects. Magical spell to move this thing from here to there. Well, maybe think about why that magic is doing it, how that magic is doing it before you start trying to come up with what sort of blue glowy stuff should be happening.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that we would think that, like, if you have, there's a magical spell that's moving a thing. Like, all right, well, what's the spell? How is the spell doing it? Is it moving it through air? Well, that's going to change how it looks. Is it moving it through levitation? Well, that's going to change how it looks. Is it moving it because it's creating something? So it's kind of trying to figure out what is the backbone of that idea, and then you can build off of that, because when everyone agrees, like, oh, the spell is air, it's an air spell that's doing it, like, okay, we all agree what direction we're going down, it's an air spell, and then you don't end up making 20 different things, and someone's just like, I don't like the color green, let's do a different one. Like, oh, but that's not the point.
Hashi and Seth, you guys are really good at this notion that, like, not getting too caught up or obsessed with like the finer nuance of the light wrap on a composite character, when like just having some really good camera shake is going to make the scene or the moment that much more impactful or exciting or interesting.
It's interesting you say that specifically because I hadn't realized you guys did the retro titles for WandaVision as well as the main on ends. You did, I think I've got some clips here of actually let's look at these. Yeah, the 80s one is one of my favorites. And
yeah, that's one.
I gotta know.
That's because the 80s are your favorites.
Well, they're actually okay. They tend to have the most interesting visual. But the reason I bring this up is the way it ties in with what you just said was, I have a weirdly, I don't have a lot of hobbies, but I would say one of them is weirdly like recreating the look of like old or outdated stuff. Like I've done it for like a bunch of Red Giant promos and stuff. It's my favorite to try and figure out what are the tiny nuances that all together make up this recipe that equals the thing that we all know and love. And it's so often it's like it's the tiny it's usually like 2 or 3 key elements that go into it, and it's not often the broad strokes that people think it is. So I'd love to hear about your process behind some of these openers, because they're so good.
Oh, thank you. This was a ton of fun because, as you can imagine, it's a lot of research. So there's a long time of like, hey, we're just gonna watch sitcoms. We're gonna watch I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke and Growing Pains. Like, we're just gonna watch sitcoms and really kind of digest. It gets tricky because the access we have to it is an old YouTube video that is all compressed. We have to really okay, what are we finding here? Let's try and find the best one. But it's starting with the source material. It's starting with really looking into what makes it great. Like, I think this shot is a great example of kind of the nuance we're trying to put into here of how would they do this effect if they were to actually shoot a paintbrush coming in with magic. How would they do it? And one of the things all right, well, they'd probably put it on strings and move it into the thing. So we try and add a little bit of that it's on strings kind of wobble going into it. We did play a lot with the magic would be probably hand drawn, after the fact on film, but then it turned to it still has to look like Wanda's magic, so he still has to look like Wanda's magic. But kind of looking into those things, how would they build this if they were actually to do this at the time, and trying to find all those little nuances. So you can see the pen has got a little bit of the paintbrush has a little bit of a wobble to it. It's not like a smooth line.
Yeah.
And this is the first time that we've been nominated for anything that feels like a big legitimate award like this. So that was really, really thrilling for us. And I think we had very incredibly reasonable expectations, probably up until the 3 hours before the Emmys, when Doug and I started talking about how we would get the rest of our EGOT. And, but in all seriousness, was really awesome to get that recognition. And I'm also thrilled that in losing that we lost to Good Lord Bird, which
great
was
title sequence,
my favorite of all of the other sequences. I would have been bummed if we had lost to something that was crappy. But
call him out.
That's what I was gonna say.
Call him out.
It was the Doc McStuffins title sequence. I thought just
it didn't live up to the hype.
They didn't hit that same short dark tone.
Speaking of award shows, what was your favorite part of the Emmys in general? Darby Facento, who wants to make sure he exists, is asking.
Favorite part of the Emmys? I think it was. Well, I don't know if they aired this part, but Paul Scheer and June Diane Raphael coming out and I don't want to say botching their award announcement, but they did a bit that went on for 10 minutes and they kept doing it, and the more they did it, the funnier it was.
I think they bombed super hard to everyone except for Doug and I. We were absolutely ecstatic.
They did. So I don't know if it was on there, but they did this bit where they were announcing for sound design or something, and they're like, we used to be sound design artists. We worked on a show on a farm, and we would do things like this, and play the sound of a cow, and things like this, and a sound of a tractor.
Oh my God, that's brilliant! And it just went for
this. It went for so long, and then they finally. It comes time to announce the award. After this whole bit, it comes time to announce the award, and they look at it and they're like, "Oh, we don't know if we should read this. That name wasn't just in the presentation of who was nominated," and they were so convinced, so incredibly convinced that name was not on there. They went on and on and on. Oh, this has to be a bit, and then the longer it went on, I think maybe we have a La La Land situation happening. Or Moonlight, whatever. It was
both,
Moonlight, right? Which one was it?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Both, right? Yeah. And so the producers come out and they're just "Oh, sorry, we weren't paying attention to the presentation. This name was in there. It's whoever it was that won." And we're sitting at our table just loving every second of it, and they're losing the whole room. That was my favorite part. I hope they showed the whole thing.
That sounds incredible. I need to look into this.
That was great. But I think just it sounds so cliche to say just being there, but really we're it's an award. Just being nominated is great and it feels good, but it's just an award. It doesn't really mean anything. And then you get there and you see the giant Emmy trophies and you see all these people who, as superficial as it sounds, just these people who look great. Like they're there in an award show wearing their fancy suits and their gowns. And like an hour ago, I woke up and took a shower and put on my Men's Warehouse tuxedo, and like just being there.
It is cool to look around and see people who are obviously at their like 15th Emmy Awards, and it makes me just feel like I've perpetually got toilet paper stuck to the bottom of my shoe.
Oh man, I felt that way at any official meeting any agent meeting I've gone to, any premiere I've been to. It's like, wait, I should put a mask on or hide my face so no one has to see this.
Yeah, it's always like, oh, you don't know that I don't.
No, I think they know. I think they know is really my fear. It's like, oh God.
I feel this way when I walk out the front door of my house, and I look to my right, and one neighbor's in a suit getting into his car going to work, and another person is getting ready to coach the little league team, and I'm just like, I'm on my way to go play make-believe in front of the kids.
You shouldn't say that. That's the problem. Is that you walk around saying that out loud. It makes people uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, I should take the bell off of my bike too. Not helping matters at all.
Speaking of what you're wearing, John, there have been multiple comments. One from our good pal Darby Facenta. We want to make sure that
Darby's going nuts in the chat. By the way, if you guys don't know Darby Facento, who worked on Loki and did some of the cool UI work in that, he's a fan of yours. He's a big fan.
That's what I'm saying.
I know Darby.
Okay, good. Then
well.
you understand what's going on in the chat right now.
Darby and Peter and others have commented on your coat, John. Those are calling it. Some are calling it cardigan because they know what they're talking about, and others are calling it a coat. But they're all on board with your look.
Johnny should know how offended I am right now about.
Can you wait a second? I gotta call my wife over here, and can you just say that again? That would be terrific. That would help me out.
You keep in mind the audience of the chat though is a bunch of nerds.
Michael, your mic is on, Michael.
Oh, sorry. No, back to actual decent questions. Not just talking about clothes. How much time do you guys give yourselves to search for references? And how much time do you take then for software exploration of those references before you start actually having to kick out product?
I think it's we never have as much time as we want for anything. So sometimes it's we'll find ourselves in a position where we're like, hey, let's all get together and share some references with each other and try to make each other excited about what opportunities we see with this project. And other times it's just like, I'm so bedwettingly terrified that we're not going to be able to land it on this one. Someone please find something that makes us all feel safe about the path that we're on. And it's more of like a scramble just to get things going in the right direction. I mean, we have some clients that we work with on projects, particularly when we're designing like real world technology products or whatnot, where we can be working on something for years at a time, and there may be a month dedicated to getting a large number of people in an organization to agree on like what the right kind of like references and broad intentions are. And then there's other times where we need creative figured out in a matter of days, and whatever reference material or research we're doing is solely just for our own internal purposes, just to give us something to go off of and run with.
Oh, thank you. That was from Joel in the chat. Ryan wants to know, as people who make title sequences, do you object to the skip intro feature that has popped up on like every streaming service?
I do. We've actually, as we've started to work on, streaming shows, I think every time we pitch something, we always pitch something to do with the skip intro button. There's ways to be like, how can we get around this? How can we make it? How can we make it more interesting? How can we make it if someone does press it, does it do something else? So yeah, not a fan, but I'm also the person who, like, even before working in this industry, I would sit through all the credits of movies and like just watch it. And I think it's actually when people ask like, how do you get into the industry? The biggest thing I tell them is like, watch the credits of the movies and see what studios are working on things, and then reach out to those studios. It's kind of the way to do it. But
who do I talk to? You see the list of names. Those are those are the people. Talk to those.
Just try their first name and then the name of the company, and you're most likely going to get someone's email.
It's insane how well it works.
It worked really well.
The thing about WandaVision is that the titles were different every episode. They mattered to the story.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you?
No, Hashi.
So, but no one's going to skip it. No one's going to skip it because it's important and vital. So, making the credits important and vital, or like you say, at the very least, interesting, is
I think I don't remember if WandaVision had a skip intro on the opening credits because they were technically part of the show. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in sort of like
weren't even the title credits.
Yeah, they weren't even legal credits, right? So they were. I don't recall if there was a skip intro on those. I don't think there was because
Disney
they were.
Plus had been, like, I don't know now. Like I haven't taken a broad sample, but originally we're pretty decent about trying to preserve the integrity of title sequences and at least made on ends before letting you jump out of them.
I did notice that. They did start adding the skip intro button to the Marvel Studios logo itself.
And it's only like 3 minutes long, though.
Yeah, right? It's only 3 minutes and features every movie that they've ever done.
Do you know how many of those did you produce?
Every single one of them since Doctor Strange. The Marvel Studios logo?
Yeah, so if you laid them like back to back, like, I think there are some YouTube compilations that are like 23 minutes long of the entire history of that's so many Marvel.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. I think it was Doctor Strange. That was the first one that had the new logo. So yeah, we've done every. I mean, I don't think it's a secret at this point. Every movie is different, right? Every movie has a clip from the previous movie in it somewhere. So we've done a lot of those.
I don't think people appreciate how much effort those are because they just think, I just throw movie clips on there and it's fine. But you have to find a clip that reads on the side of a letter inside of a logo.
Because there's
every time.
There's a lot of cool clips. I mean, I think if anyone thinks about the movies, they'll think about their coolest clips. And it's always like, there's this awesome shot of, I don't know, Winter Soldier and Rocket back to back, like firing guns in Endgame. And then you go to pull that clip, you're like, that clip is 10 frames long and there's 15 edits in it. And you're like, that's not going to work in the logo. So, yeah, there is kind of not a science to it or anything, but yeah, it's finding the right clip that reads that you want to have a nice balance of really action-y clips and then clips that are a little slower so that it's not too flashy, but there's still some energy in there. It's tough. The first one was obviously the hardest one because that was us going through all of the movies and pulling clips that we thought looked cool and then giving that to the studio and then, someone saying like, I prefer this clip of the Hulk that you guys didn't pull. And we're like, all right, we'll pull that one.
It was hard even just to make a diagram to use to have a conversation about which clips we would want to tweak or change or whatnot and be like 13 degrees into the curve of the inside of the R. That clip should read more like this one. Doug, how many clips are in there?
Oh, God, I feel like every few years we have to put a new list together. It's like, I don't know, 70 some
What is that built
in there? Wow. And then there's that is built in After Effects and Cinema. And the way I don't know if we have a breakdown on our site of how we did that, but I think it's a really interesting
someone presented at NAB. Making this.
And we presented at the Roadshow one year, the first year.
Yeah, so to me, the most genius and also like just kind of ass backwards part of how it is assembled is that putting footage wrapped onto these surfaces in Cinema 4D and then like retiming the clips, finding the perfect in-out points, scaling while cropping and all that stuff, that would be almost impossible. So what we've actually done is arranged them all in 2.5D space in After Effects. So in some cases, and please don't tell anybody, they don't actually like curve around certain curves or whatnot. They will be sort of like flat angled and, you know, almost intersecting each other.
But that's also was very intentional. That was very intentional too, because you're looking at not just these iconic characters, but these actors.
They don't want to be warped around the surface. Yeah.
You don't want to have Robert Downey Jr.'s face like stretched around an R, right? So that also went to like, okay, well, we can't really just map it on this curve. So everything is done in After Effects and then reprojected onto the geometry.
It's literally the same camera move that we use, that is a Cinema 4D camera move, moves through the After Effects scene, looking at cards at all these different orientations. Just those cards are rendered out as their own pass and are reprojected in cinema onto the inner edges, so that like the light sweeps across them, so that they can send out GI illumination, so that they can trigger all sorts of reflections on the metallic floor in order to put together.
So yeah, it became this kind of really long process, but what that helped us do is we can easily edit this thing, right? If this was all kind of just a texture that got put into cinema when we wanted to move a clip, because like, oh, someone's face is getting cut off, can we just move that clip down a little bit and maybe have it start a few frames later? That becomes a really big kind of process to do if that was all lived in cinema. So the whole edit of the footage happens in After Effects in this, you know, it all happens flat, and then that gets put in sort of this 2.5D space, and we have mats that cut the stuff out, and then that gets put back into cinema, being projected onto the geometry. So and
like camera projection like that normally would cause all sorts of like tearing and distortion and whatnot, but the projection itself is animated with the camera move in After Effects, so that like every frame should be like a nice clean 1-to-1 match.
Wow.
As the camera moves through there.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know. I guess probably when we did the road show, we really broke into that, or NAB. I don't know if any of that stuff is recorded. I don't remember the NAB presentation, how in-depth it got.
There's some broader strokes of it in the NAB presentation, but I don't think anything goes that deep into it, because it's so hard just to open those scenes and work with them.
Yeah.
Huge shout out to Russ Gauthier, our former art director, who put that together and like came up with that crazy projection scheme on that.
That thing was a lifesaver. And like, you know, China talks about how cumbersome that project was when we first did that. That thing was done in, I think it was 2K, and now recently we've redone the whole thing in 4K in HDR. Wow. So it's like, and now what we have the 4K and HDR, the footage we're getting is 4K HDR footage that we're putting into it, because if we put, you know, this sort of like this SD footage in there, then we don't get the color values and it becomes all messy. So we have to use this these huge files in the beginning. So it really is a pain to open and work with. But fortunately, it's like, oh, let's just replace one clip, not let's redo 30 clips in this, because that would be an absolute nightmare.
I mean, I think, again, like, it's such a beautiful title because the concept is solid. Like, we're starting from the comics, then we're going to the words on the page, and then we're fleshing it out, storyboards. Like, it's a good story being told, just to say, hey, Marvel Studios logo, da-da. But, like, you know, it's not just trying to be cool, it's trying to tell a story, and I think that's part of what makes it great.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm glad that comes through, because that was a lot of conversation that we had, like, how do we tell the story of the studio, right? That's what it is, and not just the studio itself, but the filmmaking process. And, you know, the backbone of all of this stuff is the comic books. That's where it starts. That's the first thing we see. And then it's the comic dialogue, the script pages, just the concept art. It turns into sort of the process of making one of these movies is kind of all told in this 36-second sequence.
And also, yeah, evolving them to each film is so cool. Like seeing the one in Endgame, or not the one in Endgame, I guess. The one in
Spider-Man, isn't it? Or whichever one.
Endgame. Yeah, so, which one were they?
Thor Ragnarok, it catches on fire.
Captain Marvel was the
Stanley
post. That was the Stanley version. What was it Endgame where we actually removed all the characters who had blipped away?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was Endgame, yeah.
Yeah, so we removed all of those.
That was such a great intro there too, because everyone knew what you had done. Like everyone knew what had happened. Like it was it was just so good.
Yeah, that was cool. And then now on Disney Plus, there's a lot of different intros. Like the Loki one, we made green and gold, and the WandaVision one, we did like a retro one. There's I think even in WandaVision we do a purple one for what's her face,
Agatha.
For Agatha. There's a purple one. So yeah, it's been fun playing with these to kind of keep the same thing but then changing it and seeing how that works.
Or you've got those up. Let's see.
Doug, speaking of doing the camera projection stuff, I just pulled up on my screen the original Captain America projection test that you had put together, which for me is always like one of my favorite things about this. And sometimes I will just like at 2:30 in the morning put this on loop and just stare at it for 10 minutes. This was a piece of an unbelievably gorgeous piece of concept art that we had received from Ryan Meinerding, who's like the head of visual development at Marvel Studios. And this was one of the coolest things about the Marvel Studios logo working on, was we had access to all of the concept art that they had basically put together for any of the films up to that point. And we took that image and did, we knew that we wanted to have them kind of like paint on and build on before your eyes. But we knew we had to do something like more than that. Like that just felt like that would be too easy. So Doug came up with this great projection scheme where we use, relatively simple models that we are projecting the concept art onto, as well as this like surprisingly complex, like multi-stage, like draw on.
So I think this one doesn't even have the final version of it, which I thought was really cool. Is we had these paintings, and then we made, I think, 4 or 5 different versions of the painting in levels of fidelity, so that it paints on as kind of a rough sketch, and then it paints on with a little more fidelity and a little more, and you kind of get this really cool paint on effect. I don't think this one has it, but the final, if you kind of go, if you frame by frame on it, you can kind of see.
They're a little bit like rougher, like the edges. As the edges are starting to come on, they have like less detail contained within them, and that builds on progressively.
But my favorite part of this is one of our early things. We're on a call, and Ryan Meinerding walked by the room, and you just hear someone like, "Hey Ryan, check this out!" And like you can hear him like walk in the room, go, "Oh, that's so cool!" Like, "Oh, Ryan Meinerding,
so cool.
Hi." That's fun.
That's so gratifying, and also it would be fun to do work from movies that people are also watching frame by frame.
That's been a whole new thing with the TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Is we do that, and then new Rockstars pops up and be like, on this one frame, and you're like, oh god, I hope I didn't mess something up. You see these titles like the Loki credits reveals the whole future of the MCU. I was like, oh dude, what did we do? And then some of it's intentional, some of it is a lot of reading into things, but it's a lot of fun to see that, because the movies, you don't really get that because they're in theaters and people can't go frame by frame on this stuff. But it is cool.
I never thought about that the TV shows,
really
you have a much more immediate, those ridiculous Easter egg breakdown videos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fun, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'll watch all of them.
Because you want to know what you accidentally just sent. Rabbit trails. You just sent people down. Like you just wasted that much of their life by putting your girlfriend's birthday, or putting your your aunt's birthday in a.
You joke about that, but like if we need numbers, well, I'm not going to make up numbers. I'll put my birthday in there. Our faces are in movies. We're scientists in Winter Soldier. I'm a burglar in the Spider-Man Homecoming title sequence. So if there's places where we need people and we need faces, and there's not someone that they've told us to use, You know, oh, there you go.
Yeah, this is a scene in Winter Soldier as they're explaining this whole conspiracy that unravels, and we had this great photo of a bunch of scientists standing around, and they were trying very hard to get the clearances for this image, for this actual real photograph, and could not acquire them.
They're all dead now.
Yeah. Because it would mean like reaching out to all their estates and whatnot, and so we solved that by just plugging all of our faces in there. So it was like every person in the studio that day ended up in Winter Soldier.
That's phenomenal.
In Black
there were
Widow.
Also Black Widow. There was a lot of practical stuff. How much of that was you guys?
In terms of practical stuff, we didn't do.
Or like there were like I thought there were like props and like shots of.
Yeah, I mean, there's all the stuff, Doug, that you and Eric and Peter.
Oh yeah, we're talking about the opening titles for Black Widow. That was really cool because that and this guy Peter who's in the chat who's saying my cardigan doesn't look good.
Don't look at the chat, guys. Don't look at the chat.
I was gonna say nice things about him. but not anymore. He didn't help at all. We got to go out to the set of Black Widow. We got to fly out there and shoot on set, and we did 2 trips out there. The first one we kind of tacked on to a night shoot that they were already doing, and got to film some of the actors and really be a big part of it. And then the second time we went out, they actually built us sets, which we weren't expecting. We were expecting like show up and like we'll just find a corner somewhere, and we get there like, hey, we built like a whole underground like TV station for you guys to shoot in. And like, oh, we built a firing range, and we built this, bedroom set. And like, oh, for us, for little old us, that's great. So yeah, we shot a ton of stuff because it's different. It's very different than something we've done before, right? It's a really big edit. Right? A lot of it was editorial. So yeah, we got to go do some really, really cool stuff. It was our first opportunity. It was my first opportunity anywhere to like actually direct real people who have to like act and emote and do stuff and be like, fire the gun. Don't fire the gun like that. Fire it like this.
Like, no, you just say directly to the camera, Doug is the best.
Action.
And
and
is right.
Just look right down the lens. That was really cool working on that whole thing and, working with Marvel, with the director, Kate Shortland, and kind of creating that story of what was Natasha's past. It's really dark too. I think some of it's kind of upsetting to watch.
I couldn't handle the prologue as it but the opening that let before it goes into the opening titles. I told my son after, I was like, if the whole movie had felt like that, I don't know if I could have done it. It was like it opens on such a heartbreaking place, and then fortunately it has that levity throughout that I think really balances it well. But I was not prepared for that opening to be like to watch some children's lives get ruined. Like,
oh, for sure, and that's also a good example of in that opening. There's a quick flash of a baby's face, and that's my daughter. I was like, well, we need a baby. Put my daughter's face in there, and one day I'll be like, hey, when you were like 6 months old, I put your image in this terrifying title sequence.
Terrifying universe.
Yeah. And then even at the end when they show the whole wall of widows, that's everyone's wives and girlfriends and daughters.
Wow, that's
and
grim.
Sisters and because they're like, hey, we need like hundreds of images, and so
oh my goodness, I feel like that's a fun like. Explain the release process to them about like
can you just sign the dotted line? That is one. I had some friends where I asked them about it. I was like, hey, I'm gonna put your picture in a movie, like, can you just sign this thing? And they're cool, what's it for? I was like, I don't really want to tell you that like you're gonna be this trafficked individual in this terrible life, but you get to be a cool assassin. So that was a fun process. Like everyone kind of has someone in there.
That is so cool.
Do you, now that you're, old hands at all of this, do you still want to try new things out? Like, do more, like, lots of experimentation? Or are you pretty much like, we know what we're doing, we know our workflow?
I think we always want to experiment. I think probably between Johnny and myself want to experiment with different things, but, there's something like Spider-Man Homecoming, that was totally new to us because we got to go back to like arts and craft days and build things out of clay, shoot it, and do stop motion and pencil drawings. And with Loki, that was another one where we did an actual shoot. Like Loki was built in this this guy who worked with us, Greg Herman, in his basement was basically where the Loki title sequence was built and shot entirely. Wow. So I want to experiment with different methods of doing things, different styles, kind of getting like, what can we do that still feels like perception, but is outside of, futuristic holographic interfaces. So
yeah,
that's fun.
Even with how often is the first note, like, we want it to not look like anything you've done, but that's why we're hiring you.
That comes a lot, and I think that's one of the things that we really appreciate is that we're able to keep trying to find new territory or stuff that feels fresh and unique. We also, because we spent, all of this stuff that we're talking about is a lot of our work in film and particularly in the Marvel universe, but that's still only like 50% of what we do. And we spend the other half of our time working as this sort of bizarre kind of like future consultancy with mostly with like major technology brands and car companies and people who are making real products, who are trying to figure out like, how do we get ahead of the curve? How do we create experiences that bridge the gap between what we have today and what we see in science fiction and whatnot? And that stuff provides such a different set of challenges and requirements and factors that we're thinking about, where, we're not just making something that has to be cool and dynamic and move the story along, but it needs to be something that helps someone while they're using it, or be, improve the quality of someone's life in the way that they're interacting with it. And so that kind of, for me, that is always like a thing that like takes anything that's about to get like, oh, we're making another conspiracy montage for a movie, and all of a sudden, like, everything in your brain is turned upside down and inside out, and you've got this whole other set of challenges that you're trying to work around and work within. And we're very fortunate that we can draw so many connections between the work that we're doing in fiction and in reality, that they still are also like contributing to our greater body of work in a way that all the stuff that we're doing in film has gotten so much stronger since we've been working in real world tech, and has made even stronger this impulse that we have to make this stuff all have some layer of plausibility or an underlying logic or whatnot that drives it. And that for me keeps me very thankful that we're not just like, okay, time to make our like 12th cell phone commercial this year, something like that.
It's like a car company can't be like, no, we don't care if it displays the real speed. It's just gotta
just blue shit,
cool blue
shit. Yeah.
There.
So I was going to say, like, the Hummer stuff we did, I think, is a great example of that marriage between our film work and our real world tech. Because, if you just look at it removed from the Hummer, like, it's a cool futuristic looking interface, and then you're like, oh, but someone needs to know how fast they're going. Like, they need to be able to see that their speed. They need to be able to tell warnings. And
if it's hard to read, the worst thing that could happen is somebody dies.
Good.
Yeah, that's it's
easy.
Just
so it's there are similar. There's overlaps from from the two things, but it is kind of a different part of our brain to work in these other constraints. We're like, yeah, people could die if this doesn't work, or if it's not designed well. And that's not stressful at all. Fortunately, it's not like we're working in a vacuum or anything. Like, people are like, hey, it needs to be,
sure,
bigger.
Who dictates those requirements to you, and what is the function of that person at something like at Hummer or whatever? Is it because I don't know who designs that. Is it a specific team that is all about the interfaces and all their products, or are there weights and measures members that need to?
So it's making a modern automobile is a miracle that any of these things get built with the amount of complexity and sophistication to make this thing that's thousands of pounds of metal that you pour 20 gallons of explosive fluid into that turns into forward momentum for you and your entire family. Like there's so much complexity that goes into like the design and engineering of these things, and the digital systems and interfaces are becoming a bigger and bigger part of that. Like they're almost becoming like a third vertical within the car companies. You've got like design, you've got engineering, and now you've got like digital experience as this whole other piece of it. And so there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of people. There's enormous teams that work on this stuff. There are there's like each car company has their own sort of like parliament of driver distraction folks who are there to make sure that things aren't too distracting. There's other folks that are in charge of making sure that everything is as legible, or at least creating certain requirements that are set up to be like, well, if the instrument cluster is X number of inches away from the driver's eyes, your minimum type sizes must be, this and that and whatnot. You have to hit very specific contrast ratios and things like that. And it all, all of it just comes down to, again, making sure that it's something that you're not supposed to get lost in an instrument cluster. You're not supposed to be like, oh, look at all that detail and animation and the cool stuff that's happening in there. Like, it is something that we want it to be impressive. We want it to be exciting, and we want it to be something where like the identity and the personality of these vehicles comes through. And we're very fortunate that we get to work on some really exciting vehicles. But at the end of the day, it's also something that needs to be designed so that you spend as little time looking at it as possible, so you keep your eyes on the road.
Well, it's also perfect because that's something that you need to know for film as well.
Absolutely.
If it's on screen for 10 frames, you really want to be able to understand the missiles about to hit the helicopter.
Exactly. And that's like, one of those things. In a movie, we can throw up a giant sign that says warning, and it's just flashing red and blinking in your face, and because you only have 10 frames to look at that. In a car, you can't really do that. So it's figuring out kind of the difference between those two. But yeah.
So I've got something I'm bringing up on my screen right now, which is from on the very top is a scene from Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Nick Fury's in a crazy car chase where a bunch of bad dudes are chasing him, and he's trying to set up this ploy to get them to crash into this truck that he can see through special like LiDAR-based X-ray vision. And then down below is an experiment that we did for Jeep to show them how an augmented reality windshield display could help you out when there's heightened safety scenarios like an emergency vehicle that's going to come darting through an intersection or whatnot. And when we did this, we did the Jeep piece after we had done the Captain America piece, and we were not shy at all about saying like, well, it should just be exactly what we did in Captain America. The Captain America scene is actually here. It's slowed down because it's like not even a full second long in the movie, but it communicates the information. It gets the audience to understand like what we are going for there. And, and that's what you need in these experiences, especially where, the core ideas we're trying to like convey complex information to a movie theater audience or to the driver of a vehicle. And, you use the same kinds of techniques to draw their attention and to give them that sort of sense of like situational awareness.
That's so cool. This is just the show where we say you show us things and we say that's so cool.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I'm curious. Michael, do you have questions from the chat?
Oh yeah, there's some more questions. Yeah, unrelated to the current topic. When you're designing your FUI stuff for film and television, do you have any input in the audio design that goes along with your visuals?
Not really. I think it depends. It depends on what we're doing. If we have something, I think, specific that we think sells the idea, we can certainly put our input into that. I don't know, Johnny, if you have a...
I think, it depends. Sometimes when we're doing proof of concept tests, we'll throw sound in there because it makes everything better. Like, no matter what, like just even the littlest bit of sound effects and sound design make such a huge difference. Speaking of like kind of crossing streams or finding different ways to stay fresh, we've actually been doing a bit of work in sound design and some other areas too, like haptics and whatnot, but just looking at ways that sound, particularly for some really exciting and interesting real world products, the way that sound can be a like a system or a form of communication with a user, as opposed to just being purely like, I guess, feedback or noises that are made when buttons
Can
are
you imagine,
pressed
though,
or
what it
whatnot.
would be like if our computers made the sounds that movie computers made? Like, it would just be audio chaos all day. All day.
I mean, even like my
beep,
phone,
beep for every button press.
my phone is always on silent because like while the little clicky clack of your keyboard on your phone is like a very satisfying noise, like I don't need to hear that.
I've turned off the keyboard because it's like
message.
the second it gets slightly delayed at all, you go mad. You go absolutely insane. But the idea of sitting here and working and just hearing beep beep boop beep boop beep boop boop beep boop bop beep boop boop.
Yeah, like even the notification that I have on my machine now, every time it goes like bling, I'm like, oh,
Go
God,
to hell. Yeah.
I don't need that. Just stop it. Yeah. Get out of here, Slack. Yeah.
Well, I always loved the Wii. Blew my mind when that first came out, just the way they used sound and the way they took it from being gloop, gloop, gloop as you would go through a menu and turned it just into this soft, gentle kind of like,
Yeah. I think it's like it was a wooden block, right? That's kind of the sound that they're doing.
Yeah, the Wii was just so tactile in its sound design, and in its interface. Like it was. They were like, we're going to make you use the thing.
And then there was the brilliant mixture of like some sounds would come out of your television speakers, some sounds would actually come straight out of beautiful.
Yeah, out of the controller.
And some would come from a man hitting a wood block next to you from over your shoulder.
And just like Miyamoto's behind you with a little block, and every time you jump in more.
And being Nintendo, it was a handcrafted block out of some ancient whatever.
Oh yeah, for sure. They're not messing around over there with some off.
Speaking of things being handcrafted and beautiful, what do you think about these folding screen phones? Ryan is asking, do you think it's retrofuturism gone awry? Which implies that I think that they believe that it is the case. Do you love them so much, or do you hate them so much? Or are you a normal human who has mixed emotions?
Yeah.
Or no emotions whatsoever.
I would love to. My initial reaction to it is, oh, that's going to break real quick. But I haven't been hands-on with it. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to play with them. In theory, it sounds cool to have a screen that you can like wrap around your wrist or something.
Like, have you seen anything else that you fold and put into your pocket, and then how it looks after 2 months? Like, it's that doesn't inspire any confidence. I mean, no question, the absolute best thing about it would be the opportunity to slap it shut.
Yep.
I miss that. I miss being able to clamshell my phone shut and angrily hang up on people. I think it's going to be a boon for films.
I miss yeah, it will be 100%. There's way more acting to be and more performance to be done with a phone that moves.
I need though there to be something where when you're FaceTiming with someone and you start to close it should like crush their face. Like it should be like an effect where they're just like, no, you're compacting.
I like that you did it slowly too. The idea of someone talking to you and you just like listening while slowly closing it.
I feel like it's like the way what's the Ryan Johnson time travel movie where the opening Looper they like butcher the guy kind of like gradually. That's what it should sort of feel like as you're slowly closing that phone. And like I feel like with all the real time filters and whatnot, it's got to be possible.
Yeah, it's got to be possible.
And then like on closure, you get a nice squish sound and one final little whimper that comes out.
So that's all you need to own it.
Open it back up, there should be a splat on there.
There should be residue left.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, strongly in favor of folding phones. They are definitely the future. No question.
I do think bendable displays are really, really cool to look at, and just like the potential of those, but like specifically folding phones. I don't know. I'd want to play with it.
The phone I miss the most.
How that doesn't.
The phone I missed the most, I had a Sony Ericsson phone years ago. It might have been my last phone before I got an iPhone. It swiveled. It didn't like open. It like swiveled around like that. And it was the most satisfying movement ever because you could like, it was almost like having that gun from Minority Report where he like has to like flip the thing around in order to recharge it. The phone didn't require me to do that, but it is what I did the majority of the time I owned this phone was just like after a phone call would like swing the thing around a bunch. I miss it. It's hard to explain without having it on hand, which is why I don't have it.
I do miss physical keyboards. Just being able to not look and type is great. I think that goes. Johnny, we've had lots of conversations about how cars should bring back physical buttons in cars because like to be able to not look and turn up the volume is huge, right? Or press a button, do the air. Like I obviously am in no position to start dictating what people should do to their cars, but to me it seems like a safety thing to be able to like just not look and reach over and feel the button you want and press it. Instead you have to look at your screen and be like, what am I going to do with this tablet?
Yeah, I'm severely in camp. Yeah, you need at least a physical knob for the volume in your car and probably a button for, I don't know.
Hashi?
I'm pro buttons, pro physical buttons.
Me too. Hashi, you look focused. Have you been working on something this whole time?
Possibly. You know me well, Seth.
Let's go to the footage. Let's go to the screens here. What is that?
Show it. I don't show it. I've been seeing through one of my panels. I've been seeing what Hashi is doing.
I just showed it. I gotta know what is this. It's really weird quality, unfortunately, but
we've got an interesting balance of things. So I wanted to. I've been obsessing over that amazing retro screen. And I found this picture of this gentleman who's wearing these cool little glasses. And I used a fun plugin that we've used, or not plugin, but a website that we've used on the show before to generate a depth map for that photo, which is kind of fun. I had to quickly mask out the glasses because they kind of got lost. But one fun thing about having a depth map and an image is that you can use that depth map as a displacement map and give give your face just a little. It breaks quickly, but gives a little bit of movement.
No, that's so cool, though. I mean, did you just painted that depth map?
He ran it through this site that he uses on the show a lot. You want to show it to him?
Let me see if I can bring that over. This site is called Runway. Let's see, app.runwayml.com. So a great website.
It sounds like you're getting viruses from that website.
Yes.
Well, that's just a bonus. It's a perk of using the site. Free viruses.
I uploaded this. Still,
it helps your immune system.
Yeah.
So it's like an AI is like intelligently trying to whip up a depth map for you.
Exactly.
I'm so excited for.
So it gave me this, which is wonderful, and it's actually this is a really great pairing for our new tool Bang, which creates virtual muzzle flashes or 3D interactive muzzle flashes. These are really great to use for lighting maps if you want something even cooler.
Smart.
Because it's always just for a single frame, so the depth mat is usually pretty good. So I added the glasses because the glasses I think were dark and it didn't quite register that they were there to make this moving face thing. And it was just because I didn't have a plate of a moving face, which is stupid. So ignore all that.
This is also we could have a plate.
As long as I could have a plate, because I had a feeling that if you took this plate and pre-comped it, you could add the checkerboard effect in After Effects. Speaking of just really antiquated, lovely, old native filters. And then with checkerboard, you could change it to the width and height slider, turn the height all the way up.
Use of green is not.
I was like, why are you using the background from the show? And then I realized what's happening.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that on the stream.
Weird that it's doing that. Hold on, I can turn that off. Let me figure out.
Oh, how bizarre!
So, question on this: is there a reason why you would use the checkerboard and not Venetian blinds?
That's I just like the width and height sliders and just knowing that checkerboard could not possibly be computationally expensive in any way.
Yeah.
Though Venetian blinds, that's a phenomenal.
It's another good one
approach. I should have thought of that. So I figured that I could go into this and then just say channel, set matte, use its luminance as a matte, and I'd get something kind of like this. And it has an alpha, which is fun. Oh, it's so cool that it's showing our show behind us. That's so absurd.
Still doing it? Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
I might be looking at it delayed, but
it's not coming through so hot.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
I did
lovely.
it.
Cool.
Except, wait, you're green now. We can see. Okay, I'll fix this. Hang on.
But yeah, so checkerboard with little thin stripes and then a set matte, and then I had a feeling that you could just stylize rough and edges it and just figure out a level of border that would give us kind of cool
there you go.
Maybe turn down the edge sharpness a little bit. Let's change the scale of that noise. There we go. I'll just do this and make it like a 3D layer and do that 3 times and push it back. I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah, Seth absolutely was right that I was getting distracted.
So I want to see, like, when you're now doing the 3D depth, and sorry to just
not at all.
Interjecting with it, but like, are you going to do something where we can use the depthy face to do a little bit of pivoting on the face, but also have the, like, I guess the resolution lines or whatnot track with that, or can have consistent parallax?
Ooh, I didn't even think of that.
I mean, you could use that depth map in form to drive particles in 3D space.
Yeah, and then this is where we get into.
Since they're both in the same.
I think this is a great example of where then we would get into a very longer than it needs to be conversation about what is the technology. So like Johnny's saying, like, oh, the lines map to his face. It's like, okay, so is he made out of pixels or is he being displayed on a screen of pixels? And like, would his face move through the lines?
No, that's
or would the lines
excellent
be part of his
conversation
face?
to be had.
I think it's like the oscilloscope playing Quake. Like, it knows that he's a 3-dimensional being trapped inside the machine, but the computer is like just barely trying to figure out how to render him as a volumetric object.
Where did you guys get with Zola? Was he, I guess, was the motion before the pixels, or was the pixels before the motion?
So it was the motion first. So we had this, like I said, we had this footage of him reading his lines, and we actually ended up playing it back at like 1 frame a second. If you watch it, his head kind of like moves up and down a little bit, but it's really pretty static. So that is what's driving everything after that. And then we painted light and shadow on there, and that's kind of, you can see the lines get a little thicker in the highlights, thinner in the shadow. So it's kind of
really
driving, cool. I want to say it's a mix of like form and this Amino squares plugin, and then a lot of layers of things, of glows and stuff. I try and find it, but I think that's very much archived in 3 servers ago.
Take stuff like form, because you could get an okay effect just using form, but you use form and then a bunch of other things on top of it to really build up this really pretty thing.
Yeah, so I think one of my biggest pet peeves, and it ends up happening because like just out of the box it looks good, but one of my biggest pet peeves is using an effect and then not changing anything and just being like, that's the effect.
Ooh,
here's
real VFX no.
Yeah,
well, it's like you can spot Red Giant Universe VHS all over the place because people just apply it and don't change anything. Like, it just at its default values. Like, no, you wouldn't do that with particular. You wouldn't slap particular on your layer and call it good with those little white particles just spitting out for no reason. Like, you're going to change some parameters. So you should do that in every effect you use. Change something, for goodness sake.
Yeah, change something, change everything, make it your own. Because a lot of that stuff is good out of the box, and it won't matter for like most people, except for like the 20 people who are like, oh, that's Red Giant VFX. I know that.
Well, but it was funny, we say this, but then like there's one Trapcode form preset that has been in every, like it was in Skyfall, like on the screen in the background.
Yes,
it's everywhere. It's like what everyone. It's the strings, the ribbons. Like it shows up in any kind of like corporate video or corporate like fake corporate video. Yeah.
Speaking of things that are out of the box, Darby wants to know what you guys think about the casting of Chris Pratt as Mario.
We had to ask.
I, for one, am very excited for a sexy Mario. I think it's about time. I think we've gone too long.
I would like Chris Pratt to relapse back into Parks and Rec stage, Chris Pratt, and then play Mario. So he's not sexy Mario. He's Andy Dwyer Mario. I'm all in favor for that.
I think they got to do a flashback scene with Bob Hoskins.
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. I think there's already a perfect Mario movie, so I don't know why we have to ruin perfection.
The best way to ruin that movie, by the way, is to watch it. Just watch it again.
I have very fond memories of that movie. I saw that movie in theaters, and for the next rest of my life, my dad continued to call me a Goomba.
Really?
Anytime something happened, he'd call me a Goomba. And so I don't know if they're fond memories. I have memories of that movie. But I do enjoy it. But also, when that movie came out, it was like 1993.
It was right before Jurassic Park, so we hadn't had our minds completely blown yet. And we were like, live action Mario, and it's weirdly dark. And it was just a fascinating experience for people our age, I guess for like two people, you and me.
A great way for us to meet Dennis.
Yes, it was for the first time as kids.
When was that compared to? I get Waterworld and Speed were pretty.
Waterworld. Okay. I also love Waterworld, guys. I like bad movies. I have a soft spot for bad movies.
Have you heard me talk about Twister? I mean, you're on the right show here.
I mean, Johnny, how many times have I used Hackers as a reference for something?
Hackers all the time. I'm pretty devout too, and I was loving your guys' episode with Stu last week because I'm super devout to original Paul Verhoeven RoboCop. That changed my life as a very young man, and that movie is still the absolute best. And also makes my experience working on the RoboCop remake, the 2014 remake, one of the worst experiences that I've ever had in my career.
You're on air. Tell us more.
No, it just it was for us not a fun process. Working on that movie was just difficult. It was sort of, fell into like all the things that we don't like happening when we see really cool opportunities that we're chasing after and we just can't get them to land. So they can't all be awesome, fun Marvel movies.
That is one where I snuck my name into a very prominent spot in the movie, and then they told us they cut it out, and we watched the movie. It was back.
Oh, really?
Hey. So that's why the entire thing takes place in the town of Appleton.
Yeah, it's all Appleton, Wisconsin. No, there was on the what was it called? The Samuel Jackson show, the something report.
The Novak
report, or Novak Element, whatever it was. He's talking about Michael Keaton's character and flashes a magazine article, and I had all these headlines, and the first letter of each headline spelled Doug. H.A. and H was my middle name, so it was Doug H.A. and they cut it out and they're like, this doesn't look like a real magazine cover. And then we watched the movie, like, it's back.
All the stuff that I hid in that movie were just messages that said like, help us.
That would be so good.
Well, that's one of the greatest things about doing stuff like this is you get to hide your little things. Like I just finished working on a music video for a somewhat well-known rapper, and I tucked my Instagram handle in some graffiti in a back wall, and no one has noticed.
Oh, now we're gonna look at all the videos that have come out.
Every rap artist.
Most fun daily session to sit through where you're just like hoping they don't notice the thing in the background.
There's a lot of times we hope things can like sneak by, but also at the same time we're very conscious. Like, we're not going to put things in there that if they were found, it would be a big deal. It's all names and stuff like that. Names and dates.
I mean, they need the data for something. It might as well be data that matters to you.
Yeah, in Batman versus Superman, one of my buddies is a huge Batman fan. And in Batman versus Superman, we had a whole bunch of stock tickers, and I put his name in between sort of the Wayne Enterprises and some other stock price, and like his name's like right in the middle there. So where we can, we try and have fun with it.
Like that. So speaking of Batman v Superman, I've got to ask if
I thought that was going to be your outro from the show. Speaking of Batman versus Superman, we have to end this.
We are at 2 hours.
We are at time.
But no, I know. Let's do one more question.
Hear how Bruce Wayne generated logos for.
Oh, that was my favorite thing because everyone hated that so much, and I was like, "Oh, I worked on that was me." It's a great question. How did Lex Luthor? So Lex Luthor decided, I found all these superhumans. Let me personally design all of their logos. I'm gonna do that. I think it's great. I loved all the conversation about that because then our work shows up everywhere while people are talking about it. So
it's so fantastic. Yeah, if you're not familiar, I mean, it's just what you said. Lex Luthor had little folders or something like that on his desktop for each of all the info he's gathering and all these supers and
just so happened to be the single most hated moment of the entire film.
Yes. Otherwise, a phenomenally holds up.
Otherwise, a solid.
Yeah, I think that was the only part, right?
If it weren't for that scene, it would have been a great movie.
Yeah.
Top flight execution across the board, except for that one moment where he opens that folder on his computer.
What a great note to end on. Shitting on a movie. Hey, guys, please come back to our show. This was like the most fun we ever had. Thank you for coming and being on the show and showing us stuff and talking about crap.
Absolutely. It was a ton of fun. We'll come back anytime you want us.
Right.
Yeah, we love the show. We love what you guys are doing and everything that Red Giant and Maxon have been doing to help us with, our work that we do. We can't do it without having access to all these awesome tools that so many people work so hard on putting together and supporting. So anytime, just say the
Thanks,
word.
Guys.
I thought you were cutting. That sounded like you were cutting.
No, you're driving, man. You tell me when, and I'll make those credits happen. This is a family show.
That
Get
you
back.
can watch.
Here we go.
Listen, I don't know if you can tell we can talk for a long time, and we can just hang out.
Then you came to the right show.